Hey there, sorry for the absence, but as you can clearly see in my background, I have moved. I figured end of July, beginning of August, middle of the offseason will be the perfect time to move because there's not that much going on in the NBA world. But boy, was I wrong, because the Philadelphia 76ers are in the middle of the offseason from hell. Yes, it's been really bad. It first started off with the draft where the Sixers lucked up and received the third overall selection, put themselves in position to select Ace Bailey, who would have been the perfect replacement for Paul George, because let's just be honest with ourselves, the PG era out in Philly is certainly going to be short-lived. But unfortunately, Bailey decided to cancel all of his workouts, believing that Philly wasn't going to be the best situation for him, which then forced Philadelphia to select VJ Edgecombe. Me personally, I believe that VJ shows a lot of potential. However, that promise more than likely won't be seen because he's going to play behind both Jared McCain and Tyrese Maxey, two young guards who certainly going to receive more minutes than he does. The hurdles continue throughout the summer with Yabusele signing with the Knicks. Then you had Quentin Grimes having contract disputes with the front office, which normally wouldn't be that big of a deal, but when you have a roster this thin in terms of talent, every single time you lose someone that can actually contribute is going to be a massive blow to the roster. But then on top of that, you have Paul George suffering a severe knee injury while working out in the middle of July, so severe that he's forced to have a knee surgery. That's crazy. This means that his return is going to be pushed back way beyond the beginning of training camp, which is also going to be very concerning for a team that's trying to build up chemistry. However, the reason why you clicked on this video, and by far the biggest concern that the Sixers have to worry about moving forward, all centers around the face of the franchise, and that is Joel Embiid. Despite the fact that Embiid only played 19 games last year, the new reports are claiming that he still is not ready. The knee is still a major concern, and he will not be prepared for the beginning of training camp. A lot of information to digest if you are a Philly fan, an executive, a player, and even Joel Embiid. I can only imagine if you are Embiid, the road of recovery has been a long one, and especially when you consistently find yourself on this road every single year, it certainly has to be troublesome, something that we will certainly talk about later on. Now, for those who believe I'm being a little bit too irrational, please let me break it down in three simple ways, three important nuggets that I've gathered from both of these articles. First, let's not forget how we got here. Last year, Joel Embiid signed a 3-year extension, effectively making him a Sixer until he's in his mid-30s, which is certainly questionable to say the least. So the Sixers and Embiid did their due diligence, sat down with more than 6 experts, examined Embiid's knee and the rest of his body, and effectively the experts came to the conclusion that as long as Embiid is managed correctly, is on a minutes restriction, does not play back-to-back games, and effectively really is proper with his condition and rest, he should be able to get back to where he was a couple of years ago when he won league MVP. This then resulted in Embiid being on some of the most, and I do mean most ridiculous regimen I have ever seen any player before the season even began. If y'all remember last year, I made a video where effectively everyone was anticipating like, oh, Embiid is not going to play back-to-backs, he's going to be on minute restriction. We had a whole calendar and schedule about what Embiid is going to look like heading into the following year, and all of that resulted in Embiid only playing 19 games. Joel Embiid hasn't played basketball since February. Here we are now in August, and the reports are already telling us that his knee is still a concern, that it's still not 100% despite the fact that he's effectively gone through over 6 months of rehab, and it's so concerning that he won't even be prepared for training camp that is over a month out in advance. They already know that he's not going to be ready in a month's time. Let that sink in. And while that marinates with you, let's not also forget that during the 23-24 campaign, Embiid only played 39 games, effectively meaning that in the past 2 years, Embiid has not even played 60 NBA games, not even 60 in a 2-year period. And yet here we are now again in August, and it's already known that he's not going to be prepared for training camp. That is really ridiculous. The second takeaway that I'm getting from both of these articles is that it seems there is a growing regret of having Embiid on the roster internally from the Sixers organization, which may be the first time it's starting to get this loud. Now, of course, there's always been hesitation, reservation about Embiid being a Sixer, even in the beginning of his career when they were selecting him. However, there was always this constant push to make sure that he was on the floor, some form of validation from the front office to make sure that we made the right decision of having Embiid on this team. Matter of fact, Embiid even speaks about this in the ESPN article. Again, I think that was a really great article, great journalism. But effectively, in that article, Embiid outlines how in the beginning part of his career, the Sixers were constantly pushing him to be on the floor, again, for validation for even selecting him in the first place. Luckily, it came to find out that he really wasn't faking an injury, that he genuinely needed to sit out for the totality of his rookie season. So that really worked out for him. But that has been the constant push that we've seen through various reports throughout Embiid's entire career. So for us to get to where we are right now, where there is this growing regret or resentment of Embiid being on the roster, is really the first time that we've seen this Sixers organization not be as optimistic as they used to be, which kind of makes sense. Again, the Sixers kind of put themselves in a position where they had no other choice but to trust the process. But here we are now at 31 years of age, Embiid on a 3-year extension is going to carry him out to he's 34, 35. And if you're talking about a player who's now played back-to-back seasons, not even 60 games, the hesitation, the questions, the concerns around Embiid certainly seems to be much more legitimate than where we were when he was in his mid-20s. There's only so much you can do when you have a 7-footer on the wrong side of 30 who's consistently been dealing with injuries throughout the totality of his career, and you're giving him $57 up to $67 million for the next 3 to 4 years. So that's really, really concerning. Now, from an organizational standpoint, this makes all the sense in the world. If you're the Sixers and you truly regret giving Embiid that 3-year contract extension last year, especially because you're going to owe him $67 million in 2029 when he is 35 years old. So yeah, if you want to remove yourself from that, I thoroughly understand, and easily pivoting into a rebuild that will feature complementary guards, regardless if that's Tyrese Maxey, Jared McCain, or now VJ Edgecombe, is a really good way to sell a rebuild. But when it comes to Embiid, it's certainly a little bit more complicated than that. Now, I am not someone who pushes a player towards retirement. However, after reading that article from ESPN, it's hard for me to believe that Embiid hasn't at bare minimum thought about it. Matter of fact, it is heavily implied that he has periodically throughout his career. Retirement has been on his mind since the beginning, especially when he was dealing with mental anxiety with his brother passing away. And quite frankly, the one biggest takeaway that I've gotten from that article is that the road of rehab isn't just physically taxing, but also mentally as well. The constant battles that Embiid has to face internally, especially when it comes to trustworthy, not only from the front office perspective, but it has leaked into his personal life, so much so that literally in the article, he's talking about how he leaves money out in his house purposely to see if someone's going to come in and steal his money, and then from there make the decision on if he decides to keep that person in his life. Like, it's actually a lot. And I can only imagine the ongoing mental anguish that Embiid has to go through every single year. And it's been pretty reoccurring. The ups and downs from the roster perspective, head coach, front office, and now with Embiid's health constantly in flux. I can only imagine that Embiid can quite literally just say, I'm over it. I'm over it. This is done. I'm tired of going through this up and down strife with my body, with the front office, with the demands that comes along with it. He's even had some verbal public outburst about how the city of Philadelphia should really applaud me for me putting my body on the line all the time, especially when people were questioning the contract extension that he received last offseason. So there's been a lot of back and forth with Embiid, the front office, even the fan base as well. And I think the reason why a lot of people are constantly at edge when it comes to Embiid playing with the Sixers is because there's just a constant amount of unknown that comes along with him being on the team, and that unknown is certainly unsettling. And so I just look at all of the factors and I have a hard time not concluding that Embiid probably is going to look at retirement as a very serious option. We're talking about a Sixers roster that is extremely thin from a talent perspective. Most of their talented players are under the age of 25 years old. They still don't have a solid backup big man, in my opinion, that will remove a lot of that pressure off of Embiid's shoulders. They have to consistently rely on two players who are over the age of 30, constantly dealing with injuries in PG and Embiid, where their most important player in Embiid is at the age of 31, who's been constantly dealing with injuries throughout his entire career, hasn't played basketball since February, and still is not properly prepared for the upcoming season. All of that with also a contract extension that seems to be growing resentment and regret from a front office perspective, and a player in Embiid who's been constantly dealing with the back and forth mental gymnastics that come with trying to rehab, and the process being more so with him being prepared and available rather than them winning a championship. It just feels as if like this team is too far removed from where they need to be for them to then try to add another hurdle into the mix, and that's another year of uncertainty with Embiid. All of this amounts to, at bare minimum, contemplating the idea of Embiid retiring much sooner than I think a lot of people anticipated just a year ago when he received that 3-year extension. But hey, those are my thoughts. Please let me know yours in the comment section below. At best, I still see this team as a first round exit because Embiid and Paul George are not going to be healthy throughout an 82-game season, and the talent on this roster, though it's promising, certainly isn't good enough to make it through an 82-game season, even in a weak conference that puts them in a position to receive home court advantage that might make a difference. But I just don't see how Embiid is ever going to get back to the point of his career where he'll impact the game to the same degree that we saw it of him 2 years ago, especially beyond the age of 30 and still dealing with knee problems after only playing 19 games and hasn't played an NBA game since February. I don't see how any of that is possible. I just don't. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.